I welcome you to another episode with me, with your coach, where you learn along with your coach. So let's get started. In today's topic, today we would learn something about control, and you will be very surprised that this small one term has such a deep impact on us and can help us in many ways. So, what I've mentioned here, what do we control? And I'll talk more about it as we proceed further in the session. Here, what I'm going to teach you is there are three levels of it, and we get to understand how much we have this term called control in our lives and how much we don't and what can we do about it. Okay, now if you are one of those people who get anxious more often, I'm one of those. I do get anxious from my very early childhood. And sometimes there are people who fall under the category of where we feel the need to control things, or we do get stress when we find things, most of things in our life which are beyond our control. We feel overwhelmed sometimes by too many things happening at the same time, and we just don't know how do we go about really streamlining them because we find most of them are beyond our control. Then there is another category where we constantly worry. We have a worry behavior because we are not really controlling things. Therefore, we worry about the outcomes. We worry because there is uncertainty. We worry because there is ambiguity. So, do you think you fall under any one of those? Even if you don't, there could be something else or some other feeling or emotions or experiences in life where you sometimes feel, you know what, I'm stuck. I think things are just beyond me or beyond my control. So, this session is for you. As a next step, get yourself a pen and a paper, as I always say in all my sessions. Today, with me, along with your coach, let's learn how we get rid of this common emotions of feeling stressed, overwhelmed, feeling anxious, feeling really worried about uncertainty or ambiguity. So grab yourself a pen and a paper and we just get started. There are three levels in control, and I'll tell you what are they. One is within our control, that's the first category. Then the other is where it's completely out of our control. And then there's a third category where there's a partial control that we exercise. And it applies, this is universal, it applies to everyone across the globe, across the people, regardless of whoever we are. Now, in order to understand and get rid of the stress, the overwhelm, or the anxiety, or rather get things in a much more structured or in an organized and having a peaceful mind, I think what we could do now is, since you have a pen and a paper, write down any recent event, experience, or thought against each statement or anything that you have recently been through, even though at that time you may not have had this content before you, but nevertheless, just recall that and write it. And against each of what you're writing, write whether it was outside your control, partially within your control, or it was completely within your control. Here, I have given some examples. Why I gave this example was to just make it much more clearer how you could do this exercise. So, given the current coronavirus pandemic, the novel COVID-19, if you really look at that, and we do have lots and lots of news coming in, feeding our minds, do you really think can we control it in any way? So obviously, it applies to each one of us that it's outside our control. Then I give another example of finding your next job. Here, I have mentioned it as partially under my control. Then reacting to situations in a positive way, it is within our control. Because whether it's negative or positive, it's completely within our control how we react to it. Then when we hear a bad news, I had mentioned partially under my control. The reason for this is sometimes there are serious and heartbreaking situations where we get a really bad news about or loss of someone really close. Now, here we can't say that we can control our emotions and not react to it. Therefore, I've put that as partially under my control. Being happy is within my control. Now, the examples that I've cited here, basically, this is just to give you an idea how you create your control maps. So, now that you have the pen and paper, and I've asked you to recollect or recall any recent event or experience where you, after that, you felt either very stressed out, overwhelmed, or you kept thinking about it, or you were worried about it. So, if that was the feelings that you had, I just want you to recollect, put that on a piece of paper, divide it into statements. There, it could be a long story, it could be a long event. Just go ahead, feel free, and write it in as much detail as possible. And then against each statement within the story, you may have characters, you may have factors, you may have people, you may have your own emotions and feelings. So try and label them, and against each of them, write what was inside, within your control, what was outside your control, and what was that which was partially under your control. Now, once you are through with this, we move on to the next, which is where you review your control exercise. Now, here, once you've done with your writing, once you've done with your labeling, here you arrive as to how many things that you felt in any given event or experience or your own feelings were falling beyond your control or were within your control or they were partially under your control. Now, there is no formula, though no mathematical any sort of theorem or principle that applies here, but a very common sense, which is quite uncommon, says that if you have within a given event or an experience things, most of it falling beyond your control, the idea is that you learn to stop worrying and carry on with your work. And if you have things which are falling under most of it within your control, or there's a partial control that you exercise in a given situation, then get into action and try to solve it. Now, if I just want to go back a bit to the examples that I had, and if you recollect, it was more of where I had partial control and within my control. Seeing that, I would say things when they are within my control and something which I can partially control, I should avoid inaction, because these are still things within which I can do something about it. And the more I get into an action more to solve it, the more easier it will be for me and the more I can move ahead. But when I find myself into events, or yourself, I would just not say myself, I would say any one of you, when we find ourselves into situations where things majority are falling under beyond our control, then I think we need to think, pause, and reflect and think over why are we unnecessarily wasting our time and energy ruminating about it, because obviously there are factors in it which are completely beyond us and we cannot do anything about it. So since we cannot do anything about it, worrying about it also is not the solution. Rather, we should try to distract ourselves and focus on things which can fetch us some productive results. uh, there's a beautiful actually quote that I came across, and therefore I just tried to put it into this session of mine, where it's anonymous. I don't know who has written it, but it says, when you can't control what's happening, let's challenge ourselves to control the way we respond to what's happening. That's where the power is. So this is something for things which are beyond control. And believe me, every time you do this exercise, every time you may undergo an event, an experience, or a feeling where you felt really stressed out, anxious, uncertain, not feeling good, and you do this exercise where you come back, reflect, and think, oh, was it beyond my control, within my control, or partially within my control, you will come across this particular proverb, and try to remember this, that most of us actually have life events and experiences which are beyond our control. Only that which we can control is where we need to respond. Rest others, I think we just need to let go, move on, and try and focus on only things that we can control. And you will, trust me, you will find yourself in a much more peaceful, calm, and a more productive state when we try and keep ourselves more focused on things that which are within our realm, within our control, and that we can do something about. That's all for today. Thank you. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for being my uh, audience, being my viewers. And I hope this a very small exercise. You know, it's not there's no great philosophy in it, but it's common sense. And just do this anytime you feel stressed out, anytime you find things repeating, patterns repeating, making you feel stressed or worn out or worried or you enter into worry behavior. Just do this exercise and you will find a lot of clarity when you pen it down and you label it. And I'm sure I've been doing it, in fact, for most of the time when I get into this mode, and I'm sure it will help you equally as well. Thank you so much, and talk soon.